morning, everyone. So I've been sandwiched between Dr. Prashant Kumar Singh, who is good with anthropological theory, and Dr. Alok Kumar Kanungo, who knows so much about the Nagas, more than we Nagas. And I'm sure that we have two very good scholars from Nagaland, Dr. Rongsung Zulu Jamir and Dr. Atul Longkumar. And I'm sure they will agree with me that Alok knows a great deal about the Nagas more than we do, right? And yes, so today's talk is going to be on something like a condiment which is found in all our kitchens, salt. Now that we have ready access to salt, we really don't think much about how it is produced or procured. However, when the resources were scarce, there was a great deal about the knowledge of salt making. So this is a statutory warning that I'm not an archaeologist by degree or by practice. Hence, all the archaeologists here should cut me some slack and not grill me. And second is I chose this topic among several that surfaced from the project, as this is a chapter in progress for the forthcoming book, and also because workshops are envisaged to inculcate deeper conversations and connections and coverage of a topic. I take this platform to seek your inputs and suggestions to polish my work. So how many, by show of hands, agree that humans followed animals for food and salt licks? How many, by show of hands, agree this? Thank you. Thank you. So yes, salt licks are actually a place where animals go to lick naturally occurring salt deposits, and the trails that animals created became roads along which people settled, creating settlements, towns and cities, and then nations. Hence, salt has always been intertwined with food, be it in condiment, be it as medicinal properties for health and development of civilization. So with that being said, let us go to the next slide. So just to lighten you all up, did you know that the word salt has been generated from Roman word salarium argentum, as salt was used as currency in ancient Rome. And so when a soldier is not brave enough, the leader, the captain, would say that you are not worth your salt. Hence, we decrease your amount of salt. And that was how this word salarium argentum came into place. So my study area is a village named Matikre in Peg district of Nagaland. So it is predominantly inhabited by the Pochuri Nagas, and in common with other communities in Nagaland, it's not only the Pochuris who practice this artisanal salt making, it's also the Ziliangs, the Chakasangs, the Sangtams, and the Lothas. However, the salt of Pochuri was taken as my case study because not only for its economic aspects of livelihood, that is salt being sold in shops and markets, but also because of the community engagement, the participation and social cohesion it creates when communities come together and promote this traditional knowledge. So these are the youths of Matikre village. This really lightened me up because we feel that traditional knowledge is always being guarded by elders who are the custodians of traditional knowledge. However, this particular village has been promoting the art of making salt, and this young generations have been engaged in salt making. So yeah, salt for us is a condiment, for some a healing agent, but for the salt makers of Matikre, it is their life. It means life itself. It is their lifeline. And the source of this lifeline is a brine well, which flows from a stream called Jekure. Jekure means the source of their life. So yeah, you can see this. This is the brine well, and this is the hollow trunk. It's a tree trunk which has been sunk to raise the water level and in a manner that the end of the tree trunk projects. The trunk is as good as petrified. It's not totally petrified. However, it is good as petrified. And next slide. Yeah. So this is a video of the site where the salt making is taking place. So there is an open air structure which is constructed with local materials and facilities of makeshift sleep areas and a toilet. So the salt makers sleep there, making it an extension of their homes. So this salt making process has series of actions. This is called open pan evaporization or crystallization. And the evaporation takes place over a rectangular hearth of 3 into 1 meters. It is made of clay and consists of about 5 to 6 burners. Some hearth have 5 burners and some have 6. And the size of the burners differs to suit the side of the pan. You just have to click on the next slide. Yes. And the process begins with the emplacement of an iron pan over the burners. And this salt making site, I call it a social fabrication unit because the communities come together, participate, engage, and this is how they try to diffuse or disseminate the form of traditional knowledge. So this is the entire series of actions. So the brine is poured in the pan using a locally made sieve. The heat is transferred from the fire, hearth, and walls and warms the fluid. The process takes several hours and even days and requires constant attention to refuel the hearth. It is essential to maintain the fire at the right temperature. And according to the size of the pans, the color of the water also becomes whitish and bubbles, which signifies the start of crystallization process and takes approximately an hour. So as the liquid thickens, it is transferred from a pan to another by a ladle, and the salt crystals formed are ladled out and transferred to a smaller pan for final reduction. A bamboo frame placed on a tender banana leaf is filled in with salt crystals and shaped with a spatula. They use tender banana leaves so that the salt crystals does not stick to the leaf. And the salt takes the shape of a solidified circle. And when I asked what is their intention behind, because some communities, they make it in a tin, some communities, they make it in a pottery. But when I asked about why does it takes this form, the solidified form, they said it was easy for, it makes it easy for convenient transportation. Yes, now I would want to go into the sacred accord or the sacred relationship that the community have with respect to their beliefs and the spirits and the prayers that supervises them during the entire traditional salt making process. So this verbatim, your water is drying and fire is dying. Wake up, fill your pots and rekindle your fire. So the elders have shared stories that the brine well was always supervised and guarded by 2 spirits, the grandfather and the grandmother. They call it Mutsachu and Muzolhi, who supervises the entire course of the process. And they've had times when the salt makers fall asleep because it is a tedious and long process. And when they fall asleep, the spirits would wake them up saying that you have to wake up, you have to fill your pot and rekindle your fire. And there's another verbatim. Grandfather, grandmother, please do not block the salt flow. We toil hard to make salt. How would we feed our children if we do not make salt? So whenever the water passage or the flow is blocked, they would pray and chant this particular line. I've taken these two contradictory images of one praying to an inanimate object and one is praying to a Christian creator, because though these prayers, even at present times, prayers are offered before the salt making process. However, now they pray to a different God and not to the inanimate object. So their sacrosanct or this sacred relationship that they have, or the reverence for the source of brine, is a collective memory now. And now let's go into the prescription and anathemas. These are nothing but taboos. And so during the entire process of salt making, impermissibility of menstruating and pregnant women. Women who are menstruating and women who are pregnant are not allowed to partake in this series of actions, because menstruation has been considered impure and would pollute the sanctity of the process. And pregnant women, I asked them why pregnant women, and they say that they were supposedly barred to join the event because earlier they had no vehicles to take them to the salt construction site. And moreover, the salt making process was a laborious process and it would have health implications. And whenever a woman is due, the distress call may also not be heard. So this was one of the reasons. And the second is the salt makers must remain chaste the preceding night and the following morning and climb up until they reach the salt wells. And a designated man was assigned to perform a jana before the construction and repairing of hearth. No, not anyone can just construct or repair the hearth, but a designated man was always assigned. And if you do not pay heed or is oblivious or ignorant, they believe that they will be cursed by the spirits, and the members of the community, or few members of the community, would become lame and blind. So these were the prescription and anathemas they had. However, this is non-existent at present times. And so far, the regional mosaic that I've got is the accounts of brine usage for tempering dows, it's a machete, and spearheads by the Sumi Nagas were procured from the pottery. They were earlier called the Eastern Rengmas, and this was mentioned by Hutton in his book, The Sema Nagas. Hutton said that the Sema Nagas never produced or made salt, but they procured it from the pottery. And one salt cake was equal to one cock or one fowl. And the Ao Nagas, for the necessity of salt, barters cotton, chilies, ginger, gourds from the Konyaks, who acquire it from the pottery. And also from the collective memory of the elders, these villages, Satsutsu and Laruri villages of Peg district, were notable for the skills in pottery. And so they bartered pots with the neighbors, particularly villages in Meluri, which is Matikru, in exchange for salt, and other villages in the district bordering Myanmar, that is Pokungri, Hol Tewati, New Tewati, and Reguri. They practiced salt trade in exchange for electronic goods from bordering villages in Myanmar. And this data is the latest one which I've got. They say that they still go to the neighboring villages and then they give the solidified salt and they get some headphones or radios and other emergency lights and so on and so forth. And the village elders also remember that salt and pottery were complementary craft activities in the village and the diaspora, bolstered through the maintenance of familial and social ties. This economic arrangement provides the salt makers an undeviating supply of pots and the potters with a consistent source of salt. So these pots that we have here, it's the pots from Laruri, and this is the salts that the Matikri communities they make. So they have this, they complement each other's activities. And I'm sure that the archaeologists would have more knowledge and on how significant salt making in the form of pottery or sherds would complement or help understand the trade networks of this particular resource. So far, these are the only references I've got to understand the context and thread of the Nagas, pottery Nagas. And this is just the tip of an iceberg, and the remaining may come up slow, but for sure. And I've given an excerpt from Dr. Alok Kumar Kanungo's paper, Ornaments of the Dead Among the Nagas. The Nagas are first reported in the 1820s, albeit with the obscurity of their origin. And we have seen, these are the characteristics or the culture that the Nagas have with oceanic communities, like blackening of the teeth artificially, skewed with the style of mouthfeel, standing developed by the large plugs, head hunting, theft, bitter identical use of parent shells and nocturnes, platform burials, and numerous effigies during death rituals. So we're trying to understand how salt, making of salt or the practice of salt making can be used as one of the rationale to understand the cultural context and migration of the Nagas. And this is a first-hand attempt to ascertain if the Nagas were distributors of salt to neighbors and or outsiders, or salt were used as barter and between whom. So your inputs and suggestions will be appreciated and acknowledged. So this is something which I've just comprehended myself, like losing the art of salt making is losing our cultural identity. So let's take, for instance, when we hear that a particular species of plants or animals is declining or is getting endangered or is in the red list of the IUCN, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear that a species is getting endangered or is declining? So the first thing that drives our attention when we say that we are losing a species, we think about the causes of extinction. We're always drawn towards environment or the environmental policies that the government should have. Like obviously, like have causes of extinction, like loss of habitat, invasive species, lack of food, human predation, disease, and even we have about asteroid strikes that cause the continental drift, and all these are instances of losing a species. However, we fail to drive our attention towards the indigenous communities. We indigenous communities will live off our lands. We have a sacred relationship with all the elements of earth, fire, water, wind, and we feel that losing a particular traditional knowledge would hamper our cultural identity, because take for instance the seabirds of Hawaii. The fishermen in Hawaii, they use the seabirds to navigate and they find for sea finding. Or in the context of the Nagas, when we talk about the mithun animal of the bovine species, we say that since it is endemic to the Nagas, the Myanmar, Bangladesh, and the Yunnan province of China, we do not fear about its decreasing rate of the bovine species. However, just for instance, if we think that the mithun species is decreasing in number, it will obviously affect our cultural identity, because the particular animal is so much regarded as a sacred animal for us, be it when it comes to the ritual of death, life after death, that is eschatology, or when we think about Mithun as a guardian spirit, as a psychopoms that takes us to our afterlife, or about sacrificing Mithuns during birth and death rituals. So this is the comprehension that I had, that losing the art of salt making will also lose our identity. So this entire form of traditional knowledge that the pottery Nagas have inculcated in themselves is about cultural deepening, identity, and social cohesion. So when we just say salt, we say namak, but like the elders were happy to see that the communities were coming together to craft salt, and they use the term salt as like it's a treasure for us, it is a valuable possession. And the women who get married into this particular community are also learning this art, and they feel that this a sense of inclusion that they are having, it's reinforcing their community's cultural identity and connection to their land. And I believe that inclusion of the indigenous knowledge along with Western science or Western knowledge is vital, as it is not for us if we are not for it. So I would like to end my presentation there. I would like to end with quote. Can you all just read this? My daughter has a PhD degree and she is roaming about in villages and learning how to make salt on a leaf. So this statement was said by my father. So after a tedious journey of about 15 hours from the Spek district to Dimapur, he said this, and I had to sleep on this with these lines, and I mailed Professor Alok Kumar Kanungo that my father has said this, and he is like, we'll make this as the first contained page in a forthcoming book. So I put this up, and I'll end my presentation in this note. And since, as I said, I want to seek this opportunity to incorporate all your views, your suggestions, and inputs for making this particular chapter more of a holistic approach. I've come up with some questions. This will be like, my session will be different, where I will be asking you questions so that I can input and not the other way around. So yeah. So we have experts from traditional knowledge. We have experts from archaeology. So the first question I have is, should we valorize or validate the knowledge system of traditional salt making? And why do we validate indigenous knowledge? Second is, what is your opinion on codification of this indigenous knowledge? Because so many Western researchers have said that if a particular indigenous knowledge is not validated or codified, we cannot bring it in parallel with Western science. And what do you think, like, if the salt making, the salt product should go through the quality test, will this be respectful of the community's indigenous knowledge? And this is for the archaeologists present here. What signature does this particular salt making practice leaves for the archaeologists? For instance, when we talk about coastal salt making, we have remains of pottery and storage jars. However, what signature will this particular form of knowledge leave for archaeologists, so that I can have it incorporated in my picture, in my chapter?